Ladies and gentlemen, in another major victory for the Trump administration and crushing loss for Democrats, this is a huge reversal. The Obama-appointed judge who stepped in to block President Trump from ending deportation protections for Somalis under TPS has now lifted that block. And here's what makes this story even bigger. This did not happen in a vacuum. The Supreme Court changed the legal landscape. The appeals court stepped in. And now that judge on this case is admitting the challengers have not shown they are likely to win this case. And so today we're breaking it all down, exactly what changed and what happens next. As always, go ahead and hit that like button if you are enjoying the content. That's the best way to tell me. For more, subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit all for your notifications, or else you won't know when I release a new video. Let's get right into it.
So tell me, what does this ruling mean?
Well, first of all, it's a devastating blow to the entire TPS program.
And Jaylani Hussein with the Council on American Islamic Relations says that could potentially mean deportation for hundreds in Minnesota. But despite Friday's ruling, he says there may be protections for some.
Most people who have TPS actually have other programs or other things that they're applying for their citizenship program or some way where they can become legal citizens. And so we're hoping that they can rely on that.
President Trump first said he'd be terminating the TPS program for Somalis in Minnesota in November, alleging they're responsible for billions in missing money. And the months-long ramped-up focus of federal law enforcement on Minnesota began in December. Homeland Security told us multiple times they were seeking out people in the country illegally and the, quote, worst of the worst. The TPS program was set to end in March, but a judge's ruling put that on hold until now.
Yeah, so this Obama-appointed judge that you see right here, she didn't just block the Trump administration. She repeatedly kept the Somali TPS termination from taking effect, ladies and gentlemen. Back in March, just days before the protections were supposed to end, she issued an administrative stay, basically saying, stop, you can't do anything. No moving forward. Their TPS is still valid until I look at the case. But then June 25th changed everything. That's when the Supreme Court ruled on TPS that involved countries such as Haiti, Syria being some of the main players. And that ruling ended up making these kind of legal challenges much harder. And so what the Trump administration ended up doing was going back and saying, hold on, the legal landscape, the Supreme Court has changed the legal landscape, and so now you have to lift the block. She still pushed back on it and kept the state in place, but then finally on August 14th, she was forced to conclude that the plaintiffs had not shown they were likely to succeed on the merits. And so the big story here is not that suddenly she agreed with Trump. That's not what happened. Is that the Supreme Court and the appeals process dramatically weakened the legal basis for continuing to block the administration. And so she had no legal ground to basically stand on and had to give in finally. But let's continue.
So what does this mean for folks with TPS status in Minnesota right now?
I recognize this may be extremely daunting, scary.
Immigration attorney Roger Sy says the ruling essentially says the Department of Homeland Security has the authority to end the TPS program. He doesn't believe federal agents will begin sweeping people off the streets, but more likely, immigration authorities may suspend or end work authorization for some people and perhaps notify employers about the change.
My understanding is their focus is on criminal individuals. Certainly there will be an impact immediately in terms of work authorization.
Now, we don't have a timeline, but Hussein says today's action gives the Department of Homeland Security the green light to begin eliminating the TPS program, even if there are legal challenges, Kevin.
Yeah, so here's a few things, because I wanted to know this for myself. Congress created temporary status back in 1990, ladies and gentlemen, 36 years ago. And as you see on your screen right there, Somalis had temporary protection since 1991, 35 years. And so basically, since its inception of this program, Somalis have been able to take advantage of it and benefit from this temporary protection status. And so TPS was always meant to be a temporary hold. Unfortunately, those who have been in Washington have not actually enforced that temporary hold until now. And so that shield has now been moved. And somebody has another lawful way to remain in this country, then fine. They can use that as their protection. But if they don't, if TPS was their only protective status, they are now eligible for immigration enforcement. Yeah, and so while that's happening in Minnesota, let's take a look at what's happening in Minneapolis, home of the Quality Layering Center where the Somali fraud went down with the daycares that was exposed, the Feeding Our Future scandal that we saw exposed with the fake lunch program for children in that area. And so now homeowners are getting hit right in their wallet, ladies and gentlemen, under Democrat leadership that allowed all of that to go down. And now the Democrat mayor, Jacob Frey, has announced that, yeah, they're going to have to increase the property taxes by 11.3% as the city of Minneapolis tries to deal with a roughly $60 million budget problem. And somehow, even with that massive tax increase, they still also have to look to cut back on 100 or so government jobs. And so while you had Democrat leadership in that state doing everything they could to protect the Somali community, now it's the residents who are paying the price due to the poor Democrat leadership with this property tax increase. Take a listen to this.
The city of Minneapolis is set to raise property taxes and lay off roughly 100 city workers in an attempt to balance the budget for the upcoming year. The city says it's running on a $30 million deficit. We're told that deficit comes from a massive police overtime payout and declining revenue from downtown properties. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey just outlined the details for next year's budget in front of city staff in downtown Minneapolis. Our Adam Duxter was there. Adam, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Shayla, and we just wrapped up speaking with Mayor Frey a moment ago. He says he knows that these cuts are not going to be universally popular, but he says he knows they are necessary in order to balance that budget. He told us without doing anything, that budget will only continue to increase in terms of a gap, reaching $60 million shortfall numbers by 2027. So he says, well, these won't be popular decisions. They're ones that need to happen right now. Now, that budget proposal for next year totals more than $2 billion. And to pay for that, the city is proposing an 11.3% increase to property taxes, which if you're a median value homeowner, that'll cost you about $409 a year or $34 a month. It is one of the largest single year property tax increases in some time here in the city of Minneapolis. The mayor also says they're going to plan to cut 100 positions from city government under this proposal. He says many of those positions were supported by grants, one-time funding, or temporary contracts. He also told us a minute ago that he knows many of those positions are still unfilled or are held by people who are soon to retire. He says he knows these decisions won't be popular, but they're necessary for the city's long-term health.
There are programs worth protecting. There are taxpayers carrying a very heavy burden. Both of those things can be true at the same time. So the job isn't to satisfy one side or the other. The job is to make the best decisions we can for the long-term health of Minneapolis. And in that, I hope we can find common ground, working together to arrive at 2 years from today.
And Shayla, of course, this is a proposal. It still would need to be approved, and that has a big hand by the Minneapolis City Council, who are expected to hear from in less than an hour at 1 o'clock. The mayor, he says he knows some people on the council will say the cuts go too far. He says he anticipates some will say the cuts won't go far enough.
Yeah, so the city says that one reason that the taxes are going up is because of the decline in revenue from downtown properties. And doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't it sound familiar? We talked about this with Chicago earlier in the year, I remember. Chicago residents highly upset because they saw the dramatic increase in their property tax bill due to the fall of downtown Chicago, where businesses aren't there as much. And so business revenue isn't coming in to be able to support the city. How do you pay the bill? It get passed along to middle class, to the taxpayer, to the property people who own homes. And so we've seen this in Chicago. We see this happening right now in Seattle with businesses exiting and leaving there. You have Starbucks. What did they just do? They moved their headquarters to Tennessee. And now we see how that's affecting that city. And here, the latest example, Minneapolis, ladies and gentlemen, where These businesses, they're exiting, they're seeing how the city is ran, and the buck is being passed to the middle class, to these residents in the city. Here goes some numbers for you, ladies and gentlemen. The Minneapolis commercial property values have reportedly fallen about 28% over the last decade. But now I want you to take a look at this. Maybe it's just easier to commit any kind of fraud that you want to go and, you name it, in the state of Minnesota. And so take a listen to this. This is from James O'Keefe. The Secretary of State wants to lock me up for proving it. You need to watch this clip. And what is he talking about? He's talking about one of the most important videos of 2026. And James O'Keefe did an undercover operation to expose Minnesota's corrupt vouching system. According to law, one registered Minnesota voter can vouch for up to 8 persons. Those 8 people do not need ID. You are the ID, an election day worker, told O'Keefe.
We're tracking a developing story here at home. The Minnesota Secretary of State says law enforcement is reviewing what he calls outrageous misconduct at Minneapolis polling sites during Tuesday's primary election. In this video posted to social media, a group of political commentators say they were testing the limits of the state's vouching requirements and what ID is needed. They say they never voted. Richard Reeve heard from a man who says his name was used in that video without his permission. Rich?
Yeah, Kirsten, that's right. Will Pomeranz reached out to us, surprised and angry, he says, that his name popped up in that video. He says he doesn't know how the conservative group that posted the video got his name, and we went looking for answers.
It feels like smoke and mirrors, and it makes me mad.
Will Pomeranz is one unhappy voter.
What was your reaction when you saw your name in that video?
It was a bit of shock the first time I saw it. I had to watch it a couple times. And then anger.
He's talking about this YouTube video posted by conservative commentator James O'Keefe at Pratt Elementary School in Minneapolis, used as a polling place.
So this is the vote. The name is William.
The last name?
Pomeranz.
In the video, O'Keefe says he was testing the state's voting voucher laws, all while giving poll workers the name William Pomeranz.
I was pretty angry at it because I'm being misrepresented in this video, which is, kind of a misrepresentation of our voting system. So pretty angry. That was my gut after shock.
In the video, O'Keefe says poll workers were going to allow him to vote without verifying his ID. It shows him leaving after being told he needed to sign an oath.
Yeah, and so he went undercover, got always to the point where he could have voted if he was actually, looking to break the law. Obviously, that wasn't the point. The point was to show the flaws in the system. And the only thing that would the only barrier they have is for you to sign a piece of paper to say who you say you are. That's it. As if for someone who's trying to commit fraud, as we know, Minnesota is just this wonderful place where that doesn't happen. Signing a piece of paper would surely stop them. And so now you have Minnesota officials who are mad at him for actually pointing this out, recording it, and showing the flaws in the system, which we knew exists, ladies and gentlemen, which is the reason why we need the SAVE Act. Nonetheless, this is where we're at, where now he's receiving backlash for actually pointing out how easy it was for him to do this. But let's continue.
What's your takeaway from seeing this video?
The first thing is he has a history of trying to do stunts like this to try to prove that the election system is not working, that it's easy to impersonate or that it's easy to commit fraud, but he gets caught every time.
Is he really being caught, or is he just stopping at a point where he realizes he's not going to actually break the law, but he has enough evidence to make the point that these are the flaws, these are the holes in the system that need to be fixed?
In Minnesota, a voter can vouch for up to 8 people in the same precinct, but only to establish residency. State law says the person being vouched for must still provide their Minnesota driver's license or ID card number or the last 4 digits of their Social Security number.
Vouching for a person does not allow them to vote.
Secretary of State Steve Simon says poll workers reported O'Keefe's actions to election officials and says law enforcement is investigating. We asked Pomeranz if he thinks the state needs more stringent elections rules.
I like the system as it is. Maybe it'll have people take a harder look at it, but it seems still at the moment to be working.
Now, in a statement in the last hour, O'Keefe's group says it did not impersonate anyone or claim to be William Pomerantz or any other voter. They say they stated a name and asked election workers questions. Minnesota is just one of 2 states, Iowa is the other, that allows vouching. Iowa, though, says a voucher must attest to both the person's identity and residency, and it's limited to just 1 person on Election Day, Kirsten.
All right, Richard.
Yeah, so there you have that. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think. Do you believe it's just a little bit easier, perhaps, to commit fraud in a place like Minnesota? I mean, we have a couple examples now, not just when it comes to the voter fraud that we saw here potentially able to happen, but also think about all the fraud that's been exposed with their inside of their social programs, with the daycare fraud and the Feeding Our Future scam that was going on. Is Minnesota just a place where that can happen easier? Let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on the TPS status being ended, the judge being forced to lift the stay, and now the administration, the Trump administration, can move forward. Let me know your thoughts on all the topics. As always, appreciate when you guys chime in. Don't forget, smash that thumbs up button if you do enjoy the content. For more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.